So I'm at an air show at Temora Airport Air Museum. There's a thing called the flight line. Apparently the pilots might be available. I'll show you in front what we got here. So some pretty interesting planes here. There's a Wirraway in front of me there. Some Cessnas over there, but check this out. There's a Spitfire there. A real life Spitfire. It looks like a Mark 9. There's another Spitfire. Also looks like a Mark 9. I think they've got actually a Mark 17 here. There's also a Mustang there in Australian colours with a shark mouth. And I also see a Kittyhawk behind it as well, the P40. And there's a Tiger Moth. There's one of them 1930s monoplanes with braced wings. There's a de Havilland Dove or Percival something, I don't know. There's a Hudson in there. There's the RAF hot air balloon. The Hudson's in there, which annoys me in a way because it means they're not going to be flying it. Oh well, at least I'll be able to see it, but I really wanted to see it flying today. You know what, I mean, they might wheel it out of the hangar, but I don't see how they're going to do that now because they've blocked off the hangar with all the partition fences and there's a whole bunch of white seats in front of the Hudson, so I don't think they'll be flying it today. I'd never seen a Kittyhawk up front. Have I seen Spitfires up close? Not this close. Let's get really close to the ones that are important. Let's have a quick look at these ones over here. And then we'll get the Spitfire, the P40, the Mustang, the two Spitfires. Switch the camera around. What a beautiful bird. Gleaming aluminium. I don't know what it is. Is it an old de Havilland or something? Or Percival, maybe? And same with this one, with the radial engine. Honestly, much more appealing, no offence to Cessna, but much more appealing than a Cessna, don't you think? And probably, not, would it be 1920s? US Army, might have been a trainer. Is it? It's a Ryan, okay, Ryan. Amazing, huh? That's a beautiful plane. It's monocoque, but it's also braced wing. Anyway, Tiger Moth. Let's have a look at the piece de resistance, the World War II Warbirds. So this is my first time seeing a P40 in real life. Flown one plenty of times in IL2. Of course, we've got the shark mouth there. 6 exhaust pipe either side, Allison engine. Nice looking cockpit, it looks reasonably spacious. You got the iron sights on the exterior with you line up that one and that one. 350 cals in each wing. Interesting how the tip of the wing lifts up. Sturdy wide undercarriage. What a great plane. Mustang in Australian colours. Again, it's similar to the P40, 350 cals in each wing. So they must have done the business. Only 350 cals in each wing. They must have done the business. They must have been totally sufficient for the job. Huge amounts of money went into developing these warplanes. So if the 50 cals weren't up to the job, they simply wouldn't have used them. Mustang designed in wind tunnels. A lot of effort went into designing the shape of the Mustang, the laminar flow wing and so on. And that one's got the Australian roundel.
Yeah, you can drop that down to help get out.
And there's your Spitfire. And you can see just how prominent the cannons are. Huge cannons. Much narrower undercarriage than the P40 of the Mustang. Really thick wing, actually. I'd say the wing is noticeably thicker than the Mustang. P40's got a pretty thin wing as well. That's really interesting. 4-bladed prop. So if it was a Mark 17, wouldn't it have a 5-bladed prop? Really narrow undercarriage, isn't it? And 2 radiators. Plus the, what is that, an air intake perhaps? There's the pilot, I think.
And I flew for the museum, and then when the Air Force got the aeroplanes, then I was inducted into the Air Force to come fly. Transfer over from the museum to the Air Force. So, quite hobby that I've been doing a long time, and I've loved old aeroplanes, been flying since.
There's a plane taking off or landing. So that's how. That's got to not be the taxiway. That's how close the runway is. So there you go.
Yeah, I'm flying the Spitfire today.
Oh, this guy's flying the Spitfire today. It's amazing.
Yeah, I put my parachute in there. There's no air conditioning. It's the hottest aeroplane around.
I bet that's going to be a Mark 8.
Yes.
Mark 8.
A Mark 16.
16.
The easiest way they
Mark 16, that
they've
one.
got the same size engine.
It looks like a 9.
The undercarriage is slightly different. The wheels you'll notice on the Mark 8 actually toe in a little bit, so the tyres are like that. And that was the design they tried on one Mark Spitfire because they thought in a bit of a crosswind, if you have a lose, when it starts to go like that, this wheel's running straight now, so it'll help straighten it. It really made no difference.
That's interesting.
The tyres out a lot quickly because you're taxing with the tyres going like
There you go.
and this one's got a retractable tail wheel as well on the Mark.
Retractable tail wheel. Look how thick the wings are. Really thick. Really thick.
Maintenance and things that could go wrong, so they got rid of that and they went back to the fixed tail wheels like on the 16.
What's the age difference?
Pretty much the same. That one, the 16 saw service. This one didn't, was part of the war, came to Australia and arrived in its crate just at the end of the war and was never put together.
That's the Mark 16.
Very low size Spitfire. This one's all totally original, skins and everything original on this. Where the 16's been damaged a couple of times when it used to live in New Zealand. And so it's been rebuilt. But to fly, they fly exactly the same. Yeah. The only thing that's a bit different is some switches are in different places, and like one's got a fuel pump on this side, one's got a fuel pump down on this side. No. So I fly them both, but yeah, this is my favourite. Fairly often, whenever there's a show on, we usually get to fly. There's about 4 or 5 of us here that fly the Spitfires, so we've got to share it around so everyone can.
All right, so
I haven't been able,
yeah, I'm struck by how thick the wing is on the Spitfire. You can see for the 303s there as well. Blocked off for 50 cal there. So 20mm Hispano Suiza, 50 cal, 303, 303. Very thick wings actually in the Spitfire. So this one apparently is the Mark 16. To be honest with you, I'm surprised. It has a Merlin engine, not a Griffin, and it has 4-bladed prop instead of 5. To me, that's a huge surprise. Look how thick that wing is. I don't know if you can tell at home, but compared to the Mustang, of course, and compared to the P40, the wing of the Spitfire is noticeably thicker. That is not a thin wing, I tell you what. It's one of the aircrew. Grey nose, is it? Grey noise. I can't read cursive, can I? So that one's got a retractable tail wheel. What does that say? Grey nurse. Oh, of course, grey nurse, which if you don't know what that is, it's a shark. Grey nurse is a shark. We get plenty of grey nurses in Australia off the southern coast in the Southern Ocean. Grey nurse shark, dangerous. So that's the idea to call it a grey nurse, considering it's got the shark mouth on it. That's awesome. So that's the pilot there, and he flies both of them, and he prefers that one. And that one is I think it's a Mark. I actually don't know what it is. Is it a Mark 9? Okay, so this one's a Mark 16. If the Mark 14 has a Griffin engine, why does the Mark 16 have a Merlin engine? So I haven't seen the Boomerang yet. I don't know if it's here. There's a crop duster taking off or landing. He's got his flaps down, so landing. I think that could be a taxiway. So here's an Australian plane, the Wirraway. That, again, on the thickness of wings, that wing is incredibly thick. It looks very sturdy undercarriage. I think you could really operate this thing in New Guinea or somewhere on rough airfields. It wouldn't matter. Looks incredibly strong undercarriage. That's my impression of it anyway. So, they have like a frame fuselage with an aluminium skin over it, as opposed to like a stressed skin. Should have a gun or two in the front, and then a gun facing rearwards. What a great plane. I think it's a Pratt & Whitney or a Wright radial engine. Beautiful. BFF is the serial. Best friend forever. This is a flying Wirraway. I believe it had one or two guns in the front and then a tail gunner. Looks like a really spacious cockpit. That's what it looks like anyway. Huge boom for the radio mast. It is registered BFF too, VH BFF. VH is Australian prefix for registration for planes. That's stunning. I really, really dig that Wirraway. And with a white leading edge of the wing and a white tail. I have a feeling, I don't really know, but I have a feeling that's the colours that they used in New Guinea. That's a beautiful plane. Three-bladed prop, huge radial engine. Looks to be plenty of space in the cockpit. I think I could probably fit into that. Might be narrow though. So what did it do? Was it a trainer? I think it was a bomber. And one Wirraway shot down one Japanese plane. How you going? Good, thanks. One of the aircrew just walked past. So I think he'll be flying soon, I guess, which is pretty awesome. And that's some kind of a Cessna there with two engines, one behind the other, like a Dornier 335 feel. And a few more Cessnas over there as well. All right, so that's the flight line there. And just to wrap up this live stream, thanks for watching so far. I'm gonna have a look at the Lockheed Hudson inside the hangar in there. It's probably gonna be a little bit noisy. There's a lot of people and there's speakers playing music and so on. So we've got some good Warbirds here. Unfortunately, I haven't seen the Boomerang. I'm so glad to see the ones that we've just had a look at. Spitfires are big planes. They have a long fuselage, long thin fuselage. Mustang is a big plane. P-40 is a big plane. They're all about the same size. But the P-40 is not as powerful as those. Well, I'm glad I've captured this footage. Let's go and have a look at the Hudson. Everyone here's got the right idea. They're in the shade and they've got their chairs and everything. So nice place to sit out of the sun. There's the coffee place. That's really important. Get coffee there. All right, so Tojo. Oh wow, look at this. Look at this picture here. Look at that. It's an aircraft carrier full of Gloster meteors. That's so amazing. Singapore in 51. Destined for Korea. My grandpa would have known what that ship was. So here's the Hudson. My great uncle flew a Hudson. Oh, I see the Boomerang in the back there too. They've got merchandise there. So lovely pictures on the wall. There's a production line in 41 in Australia of the Wirraway. I wish we still built something in this country, but we just don't. So here's the Hudson. I suspect that, what's her name, Amelia Earhart flew the civilian version of this plane. I think it was an Electra, Lockheed Electra. Is that real? Bunch of vampires there in the shape of a 77, is that real? Like, did they just paint that on? The formation's perfect if that's real. Vampire jets. So yeah, my great uncle flew this plane. Obviously they're not going to fly it today. It looks to be in pristine condition. Super impressive plane. Huge plane. There's a Gloster Meteor. There's a Sabre with some missiles. There's the Indian airliner turned into its role as a warplane. Unlike, say, the Condor, Focke-Wulf Condor. And they've got these things on the tail, trailing edge of the wing. I think airliners have a similar thing today in some instances. For a two-engine plane, you know, this is a huge plane. It probably carried 20 people or something when it was a civilian airliner. And there's our beautiful de Havilland, what is it? Meteor. Gloster Meteor. Very sleek bird. Sort of a competitor to the ME-262. How many guns did it have? Did it have 4 20mm cannons? I wonder. And you'd have your flight deck up there. If only I could see inside this plane. Huge plane. Let's go look at the Boomerang. The Cessna Dragonfly is actually, it looks funny, but it's actually a very amazing plane. It has a huge amount of power. It accelerates so fast when it takes off. There's a Jeep. Honestly, would you prefer one of those than the modern day Jeep? It's a tiny vehicle, isn't it, actually? Sort of like an equivalent to the German motorcycle with the sidecar, almost, only much more useful. Much better, really. Some old cannons and stuff. And the Boomerang. I so wish that they were flying this today, though. They were going to fly in October. Perhaps they'll fly it then. Here's some more stuff here. Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation. 25 years of construction in the aircraft industry. They've got all their machine tools and everything, which is actually really important, which we don't have in Australia anymore. Some of the guys who are making it all happen. All right, so Boomerang. Similar to the Wirraway, isn't it? Very similar design. The same undercarriage, similar or same wing. Same engine. I think the propeller is actually bigger. It's a three-blader as well, but to me it looks bigger. I think that's a bigger propeller than on the Wirraway, like much bigger. Isn't that interesting? Just the same armament as on a Spitfire, one Hispano-Suiza cannon and two 303s in each wing. Let's have a look at the other side. Sabre, beautiful jet. Nice mural there. There's a Mirage there, Mirage, Sabre, Vampire, Canberra, Spitfire, Wirraway, Tiger Moth. First time seeing this one up close. I wonder if it has a bigger engine than on the Wirraway. Apparently it makes a whistling sound because of the gun barrels perhaps, when it flies. Pretty damn huge cockpit. I don't think that's lacking any space in there. Could be wrong. It's got the armoured seat rest and all. They call it Susie Q, which is a bit misplaced. I think that's the name of a band from the 1970s. So it should really be called like Sadie or something, a 1940s name. Susie Q is a 1970s pop star. Well, I think this is really brilliant. I'm so happy to see this. Yeah, the propeller is much bigger than on the Wirraway, even though they share so many components. There are some crucial differences. And pretty good armament too. You got those two cannons and in total 4 303 machine guns. That's not nothing. What would you do with it though? Would you turn fight it? Would you boom and zoom? Would you energy fight? Or would you just get shot down by zeros? Great plane anyway. They put it together really quickly. That's about the end of the live stream. Cannon there from World War I by the looks of it. See, I'm just blown away by what I've seen in here. Some of these I've never seen before. Favourite in here is the Hudson, followed by the Boomerang. Sorry, it's a bit loud. I didn't know that there was leading edge slats on the wing of the Hudson there, even on the wingtip there. That's very interesting. So it'd help it at low speed to avoid stalling. Keeps laminar flow over the aerofoil. Keeps smooth airflow over the aerofoil so the wing doesn't stall. If the wing stalls, you want it to stall on the inside of the wing, not on the wingtips, so that you don't drop a wing. Stunning plane. I think it has two machine guns facing forward. At least it has two pipes there probably for them. Can you see those? Can you see those two pipes there and there? What would that be for? To me, that's probably guns. I assume that it has at least one forward-facing gun, probably both 303s. Maybe they'd be 50 cals. The Tojo Busters. Wouldn't mind seeing the Vampire as well. Big light under there. Pretty huge flaps under the wings. Trim tabs. De-icer access. And there's your port navigation light. And a few things up the top there for radios. A loop mast probably for direction finding, and then a mast there probably for communication. Would it be a HF or a VHF radio? They probably have both, wouldn't they? They'd probably have a VHF and a HF. Anyways, that's it for this live stream. Thanks for coming along. I'll take more footage. I might do another live stream. Got to recharge batteries now. And yeah, Hudson. So thanks for coming along. See you guys later. Bye. So I saw a picture inside, a black and white picture, and it had two from New Guinea in 1940 something, 1942, and they had two machine guns at the front, and the tail gunner had two machine guns, both of them with drum magazines facing backwards. So it had 4 guns. That's pretty decent, and then bombs under the wings somewhere. So beautiful day for it. So the pilot's there. I really think the prop is smaller than on the Boomerang. See what the pilot's there. Spitfire 16. Not much rearward visibility, really. I would say you wouldn't really be. It looks like a very small cockpit, doesn't it? I don't think you could see anything behind you in this plane, except for through the rear view mirror. That's probably why they've got it there. I think bubble canopy would have been so much more survivable. I'd prefer bubble canopy myself. Very sleek bird. The windscreen is so minimal. Such a small windscreen. There's no... Whoops, I'm not filming it, am I? Yeah, there's the windscreen. Thick kind of framing to the windscreen as well. I think there's some aspects to the design of the canopy and that I really don't like so much. Maybe it's okay when you're in the plane, but from out here it looks like it's claustrophobic, and it looks like there's no rear visibility in the canopy, and it looks like the windscreen is clad by excessively huge like frames. Again, it could be just perfect when you sit in the plane, but I don't think you could see it. I don't think you could turn around and see anything behind you. That'd be so scary. How are you supposed to check your 6? I really don't think I'd fit into that plane. It's the pilot there, I think. So I'll ask him if I can fit in it. Is it? Would I fit into the plane? I would. Yeah. Is it possible to turn around and see what's on your 6?
This one's got the mirror, so you'd have to...
Yeah.
Still need to turn around.
Yeah. Or normally you'll have a wingman.
That's right. Yep.
Wow.
Very, very lucky. Yeah, unbelievable. Someone's got to, I suppose.
Oh yeah, tough job.
Suffer and do it.
Yes. So you know what the drive, you know the plan?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, so apparently I'd fit into it. I just have to duck down. That's good to know. Maybe there's a chance one day.
Yes. Quite a bit small. I know, very fortunate, very lucky.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so Ben will probably do the solo because he's not going to choke. Ben will the other Spitfire. We'll do some formation stuff, then I'll do a couple of solo passes, then Ben will do the main aerobatic display. Because I'll be doing that down at Choke Mall tomorrow, so yeah.
They'll be doing aerobatics.
Yeah.
Oh.
And here today too.
Yeah. So yeah.
Very good.
I know, it's a beautiful day for it.
Have we seen this mini Spitfire?
Is it a Mark 9, this one?
No, this one's a Mark 8.
8?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And you can tell with the Mark 8, it's the only one that had a retractable tail wheel.
Oh, right, okay.
So they did that as a design on the Mark 8, retractable tail wheel, and they worked it went no faster. And it just there's more maintenance and more things to go wrong.
Oh, right,
Retractable,
okay.
So they got rid of that and went back to the fixed tail wheel like on the 16.
Yeah, that's why, yeah.
So,
I've flown these in flight sims, but one thing that surprises, that's the 16, isn't it? I would have thought it'd have a Griffin engine instead of a Merlin. I'm surprised by that.
Different marks of Spitfire.
Yeah.
Most Mark 16s are actually Mark 9s.
Yes.
They came back in and then got converted into a 16.
Oh, that's why. Yeah. Yeah, because I've flown the 14 in flight sims, and it's got a Griffin.
And
Yeah.
it rotates the opposite way.
Yeah, exactly. A 5-bladed propeller as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah, awesome. And there's the Mustang. That's really interesting, isn't it? So the Mark 16 is an upgraded Merlin Spitfire. And this one, of course, if it didn't have an Allison, it had a Merlin as well. There's a Piper Warrior landing, or Piper Archer. They're really quiet actually when they come into land. I guess that the engines aren't at full power or anything, but here's the pilot of the Mustang.
Yeah, so I mean the engines and all are very similar. Like they had difference with turbocharge and how much horsepower they put out. But you can make them all supercharged. It actually has a double stage supercharge engine. Quite high altitude. Like the supercharge on it's enormous. Like this. Yeah, you had to look inside. I know. Yeah. Yeah, you imagine that like the little turbochargers they put on a car.
Do you reckon I'd fit into this one?
You would easily fit in the Mustang.
Oh yeah? Nice.
Mustang's got a huge cockpit.
Oh yeah, that's good to know.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can swing a cat in it. It's
Yeah. Much better visibility than the Spits too, I reckon. Like if you want to look back with the bubble canopy and that
fabulous
type thing.
visibility.
Yeah.
Yep. You can see your own tail when you're flying.
Yeah, yeah.
A bit of a handful on the ground. Fabulous in the air. Tricky on the ground. So 100 Squadron is the Air Force's Heritage Squadron. So it was formed for the centenary for the 100th year birthday. All the Warbirds stripped into one squadron.
So Mustang's probably more spacious than the Spitfire from what I understand. And here's the pilot. I think we're pretty lucky that the pilots are here. Take them off. There's a pilot there.
No problem. Because they had sort of high octane back in the day anyway.
Civilian planes over there.
Yeah. Look, you're leaning them, you're mucking around with them, you know they're good spots, they're sweet spots.
And you're not putting them to full boost.
We're not going, on takeoff we put 45 inches of boost. In combat mode, you'd be way through the gate.
Yeah.
So we tend to sort of...
I think 45 would be a bit high.
It's it's all about putting the fuel through the engine to cool it. So using
Mixture.
prodigious amounts of fuel as a cooling agent.
Yeah.
So you can fly them off the deck at 35 inches.
Yeah.
But
Take off, you want 45.
just put a bit more juice through.
Yeah.
And we run these slightly rich, just again using fuel as a cooling agent.
works, so a little bit off for me.
Is it Allison or Merlin? This
This
one?
is Allison.
Oh yeah.
But Merlin's run about the same sort of thing.
I've flown this one in flight sims, and in flight sims at least, it's so easy to blow up the engine. Like, especially, it's a weird thing, but if you're diving,
1710.
the engine picks up somehow and overboosts, or the manifold goes way too high and it just blows up.
Well, if you're diving, you're getting increased.
I don't know how realistic that is. I have no idea myself.
Yeah,
No idea
you
myself.
literally point these in the ground and you just pull back a bit. You know, you just pull your inches back a little bit.
Yeah.
Because as you boost, as you go down lower and lower, the ambient pressure increases, and that means the supercharger, because it's still at the same ratio.
Yeah, for sure.
You're
Yeah.
overboosting it. You're putting way too much in the engine. Your manifold pressure's going too high.
Yeah. More power
So you're saying about like 45 inches for takeoff.
to take off. Yeah.
Whereas for that, you'd be getting up to like 50, 60 something inches of manifold pressure.
Yeah.
That would be a huge amount of pressure.
Have you played flight sims at all?
Yeah.
Have you played IL2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of with the P40.
Mostly prefer the Unicus 88, but yes.
Oh yeah, same here. Do you know my channel? Do you know Froggy Frog 9000?
I don't, but I may have heard.
Yeah, check it out on YouTube. It's my channel.
So you go finish?
Hey? Finish?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm banned from Finish actually.
Oh. Why's that?
Long story.
Right.
I'm banned just about everywhere. But do you know what I mean? Like flying this one in the sim, it's so easy to blow up the engine.
I've never had that issue.
No?
No. You just run it at the right manifold pressure and make sure, well, keep an eye on your manifold pressure and you don't really have an issue.
Yeah.
And your manifold pressure and RPM.
Yeah.
RPM is fairly standard, fairly simple because you've got the constant speed prop. But
Yeah.
you just keep an eye on your manifold pressure, I've never had an issue.
I always blow it up, like especially if I'm coming out of a dive and the manifold seems to pick up and then
Yeah, just keep
Like a-
pulling it back gradually.
exactly, yeah, like more than about, I don't know, 2 minutes of that and it seems
yeah.
to
Yeah.
just go kaput sort of thing.
Yeah. Try it on the Marquis. Marquis does,
The Mackie,
yeah,
the Mackie.
the Italian one.
Oh yeah, for sure, the 202.
Yeah, that'll,
I find that one pretty nice to fly engine-wise.
I love it, yeah.
It-
Except, yeah, when you do
It's so
boost it,
overboosted though compared to an E7 that it's like, I think you've got 1.4 ATA, but only for like 1 minute,
Yeah.
like less than 60 seconds.
But the average, yeah, you can run it at higher boost normally though.
Yeah. You've got your boost. Sure thing. You too.
See you guys.
I'll see you. Is this? I'd fit into this one the best, I think, in terms of fitting into the cockpit, the ergonomics and that.
Oh yeah, it's very nice to sit in. Yeah, it's nice and roomy.
Is it the more spacious compared to the
Yeah.
those? I think that
It's not too bad.
yeah,
American
Mustang's
stuff-
probably they're both American.
American stuff's good, and British stuff they didn't even value that.
Yeah, it's not a
It's squashy.
yeah.
British people are pretty smart anyway. They fit fine.
Fits like a glove in the British planes, but yeah. And the Wirraway is great as well.
Yeah.
That looks pretty spacious. Is it like based on a Texan or something? Like I don't know, a Harvard?
I don't know why they ever bothered building that Wirraway. I think they could have just got T6s and built those.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. Yeah,
A lot better vehicle.
yeah.
I think the Wirraways were just fully built from scratch.
I'm impressed by how quickly they put the Boomerang together. Apparently the whole project from 8 weeks. It's so phenomenal.
Yeah.
You know, when they needed a stopgap fighter, that was sort of, that was it really, wasn't it? Yeah. Well, thanks very much.
So,
Well, as you can see, no mod cons here. This is colloquially called the Armstrong start for a very good reason. And this is the way that the aircraft was started in World War I, and that continued with the technology right up to between the wars before starters became commonplace. You imagine what it's like trying to start these aircraft down here in winter, where 10 elementary flying training school operated during World War II. You'd have up to 90 of these aircraft flying training all day, but they had to be started in the morning. And imagine trying to do that when the aircraft have been cold soaking all night. Our first displays today, just taxiing out there, the de Havilland Tiger Moth and the Ryans. There's a PT22 Recruit, the one with the yellow wings, and the silver one is an STM. Trainers. This was the role of Temora during the Second World War as number 10 Elementary Flying Training School. Now, this base was actually formed to be part of what was called the Empire Air Training Scheme. And that was a scheme that was brought in 1939 because in the UK they realised that all of their airfields could possibly be attacked, including the training airfields. So they formed an association through what was then the Empire, now the Commonwealth, where countries would provide pilots not only for their own air forces but also for the RAF. Now 10 EFTS was formed, and of course thousands of pilots went through this scheme, 131,000 all up. They were formed in Australia, New Zealand, obviously the UK, Canada, Rhodesia, South Africa, even Singapore had the scheme in place until the Japanese took over the whole of the Pacific virtually. This was the basic aircraft that flew down here at Temora, the de Havilland Tiger Moth. De Havilland, of course, very famous, started off, they were producing aircraft in World War I, fighters, and probably the best, I'll call it light bomber, to come out of World War I, the DH-4. But between the wars, they were producing touring aircraft. And the DH-60, the famous Moth, flown by many famous aviators and aviatrix, world records flying these aircraft all around the world. The RAF was looking for a basic trainer, and even though they looked at the Moth and they impressed a certain number of them, there were problems with it. Quick for a Tiger Moth anyway. You'll notice with the Tiger Moth, it has a skid where normally there would be a tail wheel, and this was de rigueur at the time. They normally didn't have tail wheels. Later on, obviously these things were developed, and of course they're used today for flying out of modern airfields. This aircraft, or these aircraft, both from the same company, Ryan Aeronautical Company. And Ryan had produced a number of aircraft. If I said the Ryan Brougham, that probably wouldn't mean anything to you. But if I said the Spirit of St. Louis, that Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic, that was built by that company. Mr. Ryan hired in a couple of aircraft designers to come up with a light touring aircraft. And he had a couple of parameters. You can see the difference between the American philosophy and the British, basically at the same time. Metal fuselage, basically a monocoque fuselage, metal frames and skin, all self-supporting, whereas the British kept pretty stoically to their ideas of wood and fabric for many, many years. In fact, the Hurricane, when it first came out, had fabric-covered wings. This was quite a modern aeroplane, and if you have a look at it, you'll see that it's very Art Deco, very much of the period. Designed in 1934, this is the silver one. It was known as the ST, the Sport Tourer. And even though they only built a couple of them, they were very popular. So they decided to add aerobatics into it. So the STA. The Americans, like the British with the Tiger Moth, wanted a training aircraft. But it was again difficult to get in and out of with a parachute on. That's a lovely view there. So what they did, to make it easier, the main structural member of the fuselage in most aircraft is called a longeron. So they moved the longerons from inside the fuselage to outside, enlarged the cockpit slightly, and that produced the PT-16. PT for primary trainer, part of the designation that the Americans had. The aircraft, as you can see, it is, for its day, it was a very good performer and perhaps a little bit beyond that which was needed for primary training. Although the aircraft look very, very similar, there's some considerable differences between them. When World War II came along and they need to produce pilots in a hurry, because the PT-16 was a little bit of a handful, they modified it to make it a little bit more rugged, a bit more reliable. So they fitted it with a 5-cylinder Kinner radial instead of the inline air-cooled engine, the Monasco Pirate. And they also changed the undercarriage, made it a lot more rugged, because guys in training, they're trying to get them through in a hurry. Sometimes their landings weren't all the best. So they made the undercarriage a lot more rugged, and they actually swept the wings back a little bit to make it easier to handle. Altogether, between the STM, that one, and the PT-22, they produced just under 1,600 of these. That particular STM was part of a batch that were purchased by the Netherlands. Now, some of you may or may not know that the Netherlands, the Dutch East Indies, which is now Indonesia, they had a military presence there. They had the Army, Navy and the Air Force, and they purchased a number of those STMs for use by their Air Force and Navy. The Navy ones had floats, and they operated right the way through until the Japanese took over the whole of the Dutch East Indies. That escaped. It was brought down to Australia, where the Dutch wanted to operate a flying training school here. That didn't eventuate. That was formed later in the United States. But the aircraft remained here, and they went into service with the RAAF. This aircraft was kept as a spares machine. It was never allocated a RAF serial number. But these STMs are one of the most highly prized antique and vintage aircraft around the world. Very lucky to have that machine here. There was one of these based here during the war, and there are photos of it together with the Tiger Moths that were here. And there's actually a shot, one of the Lancasters that came out here for war bond drives. There's a shot of the Ryan sitting here with that Lancaster. I had a friend of mine who was very highly experienced flying a lot of aircraft, a lot of Warbirds. He owned his own Mustang for a while. He flew Meteors in Korea, a guy called Jack McDonald. And he went for a flight in a PT-22, the second aircraft that's taxiing in the States. And he wasn't quite sure whether the aircraft was operating properly, because he could only hear one exhaust, and that was coming out of the top cylinder. And he just said it was a very unnerving experience. Very simple designation, R for radial. The engines are arranged radially around the crankcase. .985 for the number of cubic inches. And they keep those designations for all sorts of radial engines. When that proved unsuccessful, they tried to put it in a retractable. What did they do to turn rocket tubes? Either 2-shot or 7-shot. Some of them actually carried machine guns, and it was because of that that a lot of the pilots, shall we say, exceeded the capabilities of the aeroplane. One of them, the lead aircraft, was actually the very last Spitfire to be allocated a Royal Australian Air Force serial number during the war. The second aircraft flew in an Australian squadron in Europe during the Second World War. Second group of aircraft, look really closely at them. They look very, very similar, but they are very different. Was it as a basic training aeroplane?
That's a really good question. During basic flying training, which I conducted at Point Cook, all I remember was that for some reason they kept on having engine failures. After takeoff, in the cruise, anywhere, approaching landing, you just seem to have engine failures. Of course, that's the instructor pulling the throttles on you and saying practice all the time. Now that I own one, they don't have engine failures, touch wood. It's actually a great little aircraft to fly. It was good on as a trainer. It's very forgiving in regards to just basic handling, but you can still do things wrong with it if you really misbehave.
Now, Matt, you have great experience in rebuilding all sorts of different aircraft, particularly the famous Australian Boomerang fighter. Looking at it from a mechanical point of view, how would you describe the CT4 to maintain?
I'd say the CT4 is a much simpler airframe and systems-wise, but also very robust. So the Boomerang didn't give us too many problems either in the past 20 years of service it's given us here. The CT4, yep, it's pretty much one of those airplanes where you can go fly, put it away in the hangar, and then within a week or two or just a couple of days, whatever you want, bring it out again, kick the tyres, check all the systems, and you're right to go. It's a yeah, thanks for touching wood there, Skates. So it's a beautiful little aeroplane to fly and a beautiful aeroplane to own.
So we've got two different coloured examples here. We have yours, which is the yellow and the green. We have the Fantacam. Why the difference in the paint schemes?
From my recollection, I believe there was a huge amount of research done by CSIRO to look into the colour scheme on the aircraft that would make it the most visible so that it could be seen under any conditions. So they chose the yellow and green, and shortly afterwards realised it was disappearing into the landscape very easily. So all that research was thrown out the door, and a little bit later it came along with the fan scheme. So my aircraft, which is in the yellow and green, was the original colours they were delivered from the factory from New Zealand, or New Zealand Aerospace at that stage. And I believe it was around about 1981, 82, that year, that the fleet started to get changed over to the fan scheme, the orange, white, silver.
Archie, flying with 100 squadrons, what is it like to be flying a CT4? Well, we'll wait for the Spitfire. That is a sound you will never forget. Archie, what's it like to be flying the CT4 as part of 100 Squadron?
Oh, look, it's like all of the aircraft, it's an absolute privilege. I've been lucky enough to fly a few of the airplanes, and but the CT4, it's hard to split any of them. It's a privilege to fly any of them, but the CT4 in particular is a great fun. It's a really nice handling of the airplane. Yeah.
And the role of 100 Squadron, it was created for a specific purpose, but now it is bringing the RAAF's heritage to people all around Australia.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what it's all about. Teaching the squadron is about, teaching people about the history and heritage of Air Force, and never get sick of this.
Listen to the sound of these last two aircraft.
Yeah, so from the RE8 right through to the CT4, which really represents the more modern of the aircraft that we have.
That there was going to be a war and that Australia would need aircraft, but we had no industry. So these guys formed the Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation. They started to build a huge factory on the Yarra River right next to where the Westgate Bridge is these days. And they sent a delegation overseas to find an aircraft that was modern and suited for our purposes. Now, our purposes, we needed a general purpose aeroplane. So they went to England and we were offered basically obsolete types. The only modern machine was a very specific aeroplane, the Westland Lysander, but it had a specific role, not general purpose. Led by Lawrence Wackett, who was a pilot in World War I and an aircraft designer, and a very astute man. They went to the United States, saw North American aviation, what they were producing, and said that this would be ideal. Came back to Australia, and the government was horrified that a potential American choice was going to be made and not British. But fortunately, he had his way, and we received the license to manufacture this T6 aircraft, which we called the Wirraway. Wirraway meaning challenge. Both those aircraft have the same engine, but I pointed out to you on the takeoff there's a difference in sound between the Wirraway and the two that took off later, the Harbour. 600 horsepower Pratt & Whitney radial. One of them, the Wirraway, has a geared engine, 3-bladed prop. The T6 is basically direct and 2-blade prop. That sound was the prop tips going supersonic. You can just sort of hear it there. It's most prevalent on takeoff. very, very good trainer. The difference between the green Wirraway and the yellow Harvard is quite substantial. On the wings of the early Harvards or the early T6s, they had a thing called a washout, and that was missing on the early ones. Washout is where the angle of the wing actually changes towards the wingtip, so that the whole wing stalls evenly. And by stall, I don't mean the engine stops, I mean that the wing stops producing lift. So with the Wirraway, it is more difficult to handle than the Harvard. Both of these aircraft had one of the first hydraulic systems that were produced. The seals were actually, they called them bucket seals, and they were made out of leather. There was a little power box on the side that you had to operate before you then operated the various systems. The early oils that were in there were actually caster based, so they made a really good paint stripper. But again, we're talking about an aircraft that first flew in 1935. We started to produce them here in 1939. There were over 755 Wirraways that were produced here, and they served not only as training aircraft, but also liaison aircraft. And there were two squadrons that actually went overseas into the combat area, number 4 and number 5 squadron. One operating through New Guinea and the other one operating down through and into the Solomon Islands. When the Pacific War broke out, when Japan hit Pearl Harbor, we were producing these aircraft, but we had no fighters. So very, very quickly, a fighter was designed using as much as they could from the Wirraway, and they called it the Boomerang. You might have heard Matt Denning talking about the Boomerang earlier on. It used the biggest engine that was then being produced in Australia, which is the Pratt & Whitney R1830, same engine that's in a DC-3 or a Catalina, but at that time it was being produced for the Beaufort bomber. So we had a plentiful supply of those engines, and 2 20mm cannon and 4 machine guns. And it was, we built 250 of them as a stopgap fighter. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to have that ambulance come through in a couple of seconds. Actually, one of the aircraft that served with number 5 squadron, the colour is called foliage green, but the reason for the Southwest Pacific area markings was because there was a lot of friendly fire incidents, particularly in the early parts of the war. And there is even recorded an Australian aircraft was shot down by an American fighter pilot flying a P-38 in New Guinea, and he actually had the temerity to put an Australian flag on as one of the victory markings. So to avoid that, white leading edges and white tail designated an alloy aircraft. But prior to that, anything with a round engine was a Japanese aircraft. Onto the hot exhaust. That aircraft is one of the machines that were operated by the Royal New Zealand Air Force. They operated those right the way through the war as training aircraft from various bases in New Zealand. Woodburn in particular being one just outside of Glenham. Wigram as well in the latter stages. And this aircraft is wearing the markings applied to the trainers in the latter days of their service. It's owned and flown by Dave Salter and his lovely wife Carolyn. They brought the aircraft down for this weekend. Dave has a reasonable amount of experience flying, 34,000 hours, so and he's owned this aircraft for quite some time. Again, you've seen these manoeuvres before. Taken in an aircraft that is heavier, has more systems in it. The BT-13 had a constant speed propeller, the PT didn't. It was a lighter aircraft, that was heavier, this is far heavier, and it also has a retractable undercoat, so something else to think about. These aircraft were used for advanced training for people that were going on to fighters, bombers and transports during World War II. And they are used for that purpose today for pilots transitioning from lighter aircraft onto the crop of World War II fighters that are currently being restored and flown all over the world. Even so far, after 1945, spares for these aircraft are quite plentiful, because you can imagine with 15,500 of them being built, how many spares were there to... unmistakable elliptical wing plan form that is the hallmark of the Spitfire. Flying today there is a Mark 8 and a Mark 16. You can tell that they are virtually identical. The difference between them visually is that the Mark 8 has a retractable tail wheel, whereas the Mark 16 is fixed. Aircraft flown today by Ben Lappin from 100 Squadron and Scotty Taberner, also from 100 Squadron. Both Ben and Scotty are not regular serving Air Force officers, they're Special Capability Reserve officers, but they are nonetheless in the RAAF Reserve. Spitfire first flew in 1936. Went into service with number 19 Squadron based at Duxford in Cambridgeshire, which ironically is now the home of the Spitfire in England. Some 20,300 of these were manufactured in 24 different marks, from the Mark 1 right the way through, And as well as that, there were some 2,300 naval versions built called the Seafire. Both the Seafire and the Spitfire were either powered by the Rolls-Royce Merlin V12 or the Griffin, which was a V12. The difference being that the Merlin is about 27 litres swept volume, the Griffin about 35, and they rotate in opposite directions, although built by the same company. Very peculiar. Armament increased from machine guns, basically 8 of them, through to 2 20mm cannons on each side in the final versions, the Mark 24. Operated with about 30 different air arms at various periods, obviously principally with the RAF. The Americans flew them, Australians, Kiwis, Poles, Canadians flew them as part of the RAF. We had about 650 of them here, both the Mark 8 and the earlier Mark 5. The Mark 5s came out in time for the defence of Darwin against the Japanese raids up there. Well over 100 air raids on Darwin. A lot of people don't know how many took place. How on display boards, how the undercarriage worked, how the flap system worked. Both aircraft were later acquired by an Australian aviation pioneer, Sid Marshall. He had a small museum at Bankstown Airport where the second aircraft, it was put on display. This machine was basically stored in the open. That aircraft eventually, after a period of time at the Camden Museum of Aviation, where it was on loan to Werner and Harold Thomas, who got the aircraft actually operational on the ground because we couldn't fly it. It went to Colpay up at Scone, and it was rebuilt by Cole and his team to become the first Spitfire to fly in Australia since the end of the Second World War. It's painted currently in the markings of Wing Commander Bobby Gibbs, DSO DFC. Second aircraft flown by there, under the 2nd Tactical Air Force in Europe. Second aircraft, the Mark 16, it actually went through a number of maintenance units before it was eventually sold, and it became part of the background aircraft during the Battle of Britain movie. It was later given to one of the guys as part payment for his services, keeping the Hurricanes and the Spitfires and the 109s flying in that movie. Eventually acquired by the Alpine Fighter Collection, said that, and he was flying Spitfires during World War II, and he was in charge of training Spitfires in Egypt for a short period of time. Would you say that's accurate?
Absolutely. It's a very small cockpit in there. When you close the door and you close the canopy, your shoulders are touching the edge of the aeroplane. And there's just not much room to move. The instrument panel's right close to your face. And yeah, you really strap it on and become one with the aeroplane. It's very nice in the air and a bit of a handful on the ground.
So it is as good to fly as everybody says. Like Pierre Closselman had this description. Everybody who wants to know anything about flying a Spitfire should read the first part of his book when he describes what it was like. It was just sheer elation.
Absolutely. Looking out there at those elliptical wings, and it becomes very light and well balanced in the controls. It just becomes part of your body, and you just think about what you want to do and the aeroplane does it.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Scotty Tappan of that great demo in the Mark 8 Spitfire. As you can see, our next display formation up there, the wonderful P40 and the North American P51 Mustang, or in this case, built by the Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation. Mustang's flown today by Wing Commander Jason Eastie. He's the CEO of 100 Squadron, and the P40 owned and flown by Al Arthur from Albury. These aircraft are representative of the machines that won the Second World War for the Allies. Of course, you had the Spitfire and the Hurricane, but the P40 was the workhorse that flew throughout the war. It's actually designed off another aircraft built by Curtiss, and the Mustang. The Mustang came about because of a requirement for the RAF for a fighter, and they were actually looking for a different aeroplane. Over 14,000, nearly 15,000 P40s built. They were an extremely rugged aircraft. A normal aircraft has a main spar and a rear spar, a secondary spar. The P40 basically has 5 spars, so the wing is extremely strong. As I said, it was a modification of an existing fighter, the P-36 Hawk, that was built by Curtiss. It had a radial engine, the same radial engine that's in the Boomerang fighter or the DC-3, a Pratt & Whitney R1830. And you could get that aircraft as a fighter with either fixed or retractable undercarriage. When the Allison engine came along, they mated the two and came up with the early models of the P40. There were basically 4 variants of the P40, known as initially as the Tomahawk, and then later as the Kittyhawk to the British and Commonwealth forces. In the earlier models, like the B and the C, the Allison engine had a very long reduction gearbox, and that's what takes the power from the crankshaft to the propeller. It's quite long. So the nose on the earlier ones was very streamlined. It still had the nose-mounted radiator and oil cooler, but not the same size as this one. Later went on through the E model with various improvements. Then Merlin-powered ones, the F and the L. And then finally the P40N. You can see on this one you've got the normal canopy with a high back fuselage. That went on throughout the P40 series. But the later models, instead of having those scalloped areas behind the pilot for additional rear view, they actually turned it into a big glass house area. So it looks substantially different just behind the pilot. It was also longer. We had several hundred P40s that operated with the RAAF throughout the Pacific campaign. And we also operated the earlier Tomahawks as part of the RAF in the Levant and also later in the Western Desert across North Africa. Squadron leader Clive Caldwell, he was flying P40s at the time, and he is credited with the highest score of all P40 aces during the Second World War. Lots of aces flew these aircraft, guys like Robert de Haven, Alexander Kuznetsov with the Russians. Bobby Gibbs started off in these. Louis Truscott. All names very well known in Australia during the Second World War. 650 calibre machine guns, could carry 3 bombs, one under each wing and one under the fuselage, or could carry a big central drop tank. And as I said, very rugged. There are photos of some P40s that have come back with immense battle damage, absolutely immense. One Australian one with the name Svengali painted on the nose. About a third of the wing had been blown off by a Japanese shell. Unusual undercarriage retraction. Instead of folding up into the wing as you would think they would normally do, like the Spitfire and the Wirraway, they actually turn at 90 degrees and fold backwards into the wing. Similar retraction was also used on the Hellcat and also on the Corsair. Very nice hesitation roll there. It's owned and flown by Al Arthur. He's brought the aircraft up from Albury. The aircraft's painted in the markings of number 112 Squadron, Royal Air Force. Now 112 Squadron was the first ones to actually put the shark mouth marking on the P-40. A lot of people think that it was the American volunteer group in the China-Burma-India theatre, but it was actually 112 Squadron, and Clive Caldwell later commanded that unit, the Australian, and when he came back to flying and commanding the Spitfire wing in Australia, they ended up with 457 Squadron with these large shark mouth markings on them. And that was to honour Clive Caldwell. Just a very quick announcement now from the Integrated Service People's Association, who would very much like to thank you for assisting them with the raffle. Today's first draw winner is Harry Goodsell. Harry Goodsell, ticket number 02130. Second draw winner, G. Easthope, ticket number 01084. And the third draw winner is Chris Patterson, ticket 01227. If you'd like to head over to where you've purchased your tickets, you can pick up your prizes right now. Now don't head off, ladies and gentlemen. We have a... seconds time, Alex Christensen is going to be giving us a demonstration in the RAAF's training aircraft, the PC-21. This aircraft took over from the PC-9, which many of you will be familiar with. Right from behind you right now. Machine's also operated by number 2 FTS and number 4 Squadron in the role of, again, a more advanced forward air control, training of JTAC officers. This aircraft looks very similar to the PC-9, but it is a very different machine. Built by Pilatus in Switzerland.